Dessicant dehumidifier. Very good units, I've got several of them, and there's the identification plate with the part number or the model number that you need, and any other information you want to cross-reference yours against this. And it's just been repaired because what they do is they stop working, and generally the problem is due to the fact that the Dessicant disc inside has stopped rotating, okay, for one reason or another, and we'll go into that when we get into the machine. I don't know if you look through there, can you see through that gap? I've just rested the torch, my phone with the light on here so that I can see what's going on inside. And if you take the nylon grill out, that thing, and then look through the gap, you can see the disc turning inside. Okay, so this one's working because I have just repaired it. But if you're interested in finding out how to fix this, then watch the rest of the video. Okay, now it's stopped because it's just shut down. Yeah, so yeah, watch the video and you'll find out how to repair a non-spinning disc. Right, today on the bench we've got the AMCOR Desiccant dehumidifier. Here's the model number. Model number DESD8L. You can see it there. Now these are very good, and they do truck on for some time, but they wear out long before they're finished, if you know what I mean. There's a couple of components in here which wear out, which need to be replaced to make it work reliably. It's got some designed obsolescence which we can overcome by a bit of maintenance, and I'll just show you what's inside. So take this out, take the liquid drawer out. This is in my shed. The thing about these Dessicant dehumidifiers is that they work very well at low temperatures, so they're good for things like workshops. Where it's cold, they will still work, and so I use it. But this has gone wrong a couple of times, and I'll just take it apart and show you what is the problem is. There's screws here, 4 screws in the top, 4 there. There's 1, 2, 3, 1 here in that slot, 4. Then underneath there are 2 more. There's 1 under there in that part, and 1 over there. So I'm just going to take all those screws out. When you take these out, I'll take the top ones out first and show you how the top comes off. Right, to get the top piece off, there's a screw here, screw in there, and then around this side there are 4 more screws. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so when you've done that, you can just take the top off. It's connected by looms, it won't come off completely. You can just lift it free so that you can take the rest of the screws out and separate the 2 halves, left half and the right half. Okay, so we'll just do that. Okay, so to take this top cover off, you need to remove this screw screw around there by the mains lead, and then 2 screws, 1 here underneath, that one, and also that one. Okay, so there's the screws we need to take off, and then when it's off we can just lift, completely remove that cover, revealing her innards. Okay, now this is the condenser, the part where the warm air is blown through and condenses and then runs out the bottom into the tank. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws to remove the condenser. Okay, so the cover is off, and now we can remove the condenser. There we go, so the condenser is removed, and just to reveal what's inside. So you can see that this is the main Desiccant disc. This rotates while the air is being blown through. So this section here, this area here, has got the ambient air being blown through, and it's just basically a sort of cloth covered cardboard coated with chemicals which are deliquescent. They absorb moisture from the atmosphere. Then it just comes around to this section and here, and then in this section hot air is being blown through to redesiccate this. So this is sealed off from the environment, and this blows air through. The moisture that's been absorbed by the active coating on the wheel is driven off by the heat on the other side. The air is blown through here, then the air blows through the condenser and then condenses, okay, ambient temperature. So that's one side. And what's wrong with this one? You can see on here, look, we've got some black marks or brown marks where it's been slightly scorched. and that is because the motor which turns this disc, probably about 1 RPM, something like that, probably less, it goes quite slowly, yeah, the motor has stopped going and the disc has stopped rotating. If we lift the mechanism out, it's just dropped in there. I'll just lift that out and we'll resume and look at the other side of the mechanism. Okay, so here's a view of the other side of the internal mechanism. We've got our main circulation fan, that's the thing that drives the bulk of the air around. There's the other smaller fan, that's the fan that blows the hot air through the heating compartment on the rotor to dry out the reagent and reactivate it by removing the moisture and blowing it through the condenser. We've got the disc itself here, obviously. There's the heating element, thermal cutout, heating elements inside, a few other wires. There's the mains cable coming out, and then this part here is a motor which turns this disc. You can see that there's a ring gear, basically a cog on the outside, and then this small motor which is a gear motor, synchronous gear motor, which will drive this round at the appointed speed. And the shaft of this motor goes round at 4 RPM at 50 cycles. It's a mains motor, okay? Now, this has stopped working a couple of times, and one of the main problems is that I fixed before is that underneath there is the main shaft pivot upon which the disc is sitting, and it rotates. Now that central spigot is just made of this normal glass reinforced moulded plastic, this stuff, and the actual shaft wears away, and when the shaft wears in there and the bearing wears, you get a lot of play generated over maybe many thousand hours of operation. It's been in operation a long time, this dehumidifier. You'll find that the gear will start to move sideways, and then the outside of this ring gear here will foul on the inside of this casing, and it will be too stiff to turn. So I know this is not turning, okay? I'll show you when it's working. I'll just show you when it's working how you check to see if the disc is rotating. You just basically take the filter out, that thing, switch. You need to leave it a while after you switch it on to settle down before it actually starts to work, okay? So it won't work straight away, it does strange things. So here's the motor, and to see whether we've got a problem with the bearing or the motor, we can just take the motor off. Just held on with 2 screws. You can see there's a rather large plastic gear on the bottom of this synchronous motor. And so with the motor removed, you can tell where the disc is jamming just by turning it, and if it's fairly easy to move in both directions, which it is, it's not that which is causing it to stop. This motor, when it's working, has got quite a lot of torque, and it will turn that quite happily, right? So we've not got a jammed rotor. If you can't move that easily with your finger, then you need to look further and look inside and look at this pivot, because the pivot will be worn. On mine, I machined a new nylon pivot housing that fit in here, and then sleeved the actual pivot that was on there, so I made it into a different diameter and then put some grease on it when I put it back together, and it's been fine. And I'd say that happened about 2 years ago, but now it's stopped turning again, and I know from experience that this thing is the first thing to fail usually. This is the same motor as they use on a microwave turntable. And you know, a microwave, you're not going to be cooking for thousands of hours in a microwave. You need the total product life of this, maybe maximum 1,000 hours. Well, these wear out, and I've repaired this once because the gears inside got jammed, but it's now completely failed, I think, and I think that's the cause of the problem. Okay, so we need to replace that motor. So what do you use? Well, as I said, it is a motor from a microwave turntable, an ordinary generic microwave they've used, and so you can actually buy replacements on eBay, online, replacement microwave rotational motor. and you can see there it is. It's basically a replacement for that one. This one is slightly smaller, but I find they work okay, alright. And you've only got 2 wires which you need to splice and reconnect to these spade terminals, and some of the microwave motors have actually got wires coming out of them as well, so you can just connect the wires up. But I think if I just change that motor, this is going to fix the problem. To take the gear off the motor, you just remove the screw, and some have screws, some don't, and slot it onto the new motor. These motors seem to be standard, so I'm just going to fit the new motors, and I'll connect the wires up and we'll try it. The motor is in position. I'll crimp some wires onto the end of the wires, and there's the new motor in the in situ. And you can see the disc is now turning. If you want to run it like this, be careful because there's live connections obviously, and you have to balance the mechanism on top of the tank assembly because there's a magnet in there which activates a hall sensor. So unless the hall sensor sees the magnet, it's attached to the float, and when the water fills up, the float comes up and the magnet then loses contact with the sensor, so it knows that the tray is not in or it's overflowing. Okay, so you can see it's going around on this side. Now if we walk around to the other side, so there's the heater assembly down there. This part is the heater assembly. Then walking around we have the motor, and around the front you can see the disc turning now. And the final check is that I'm turned up to number 3 maximum setting, and if you just put your hand down by here you can feel the hot moist air blowing out from behind the heater and the disc, and the heater is working. So that is working now, so I'm just going to put it back together. But you have to be a bit careful about making sure you get the cable strain relief into the casing, 2 halves of the casing before you put the screws in. But it should be alright now for a little while. That motor was, the replacement motor was £3.50 from eBay. It's a microwave turntable motor. Okay, so that's turning again, so we're all good. And I hope you enjoyed this, and if you found it useful, very good. Subscribe if you can and leave me a like, then I'll appreciate that too. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that.